Hello. I'm going to be watching Dave Farina's video on Pierre Kory. He's going to be talking about ivermectin and COVID or whatnot, or like ivermectin specifically, and like him being a fraud and the anti-science propagators of science. So let me preface this by saying I'm not really that scientific with my knowledge. I do remember some like basics, facts of science. Like for instance, like I'm gonna go off and I'm gonna rattle off the top of my head everything that I remember from science classes. Uh, you know, one of Newton's laws is for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So like if you punch something, like you're gonna get hit with that same amount of force, or like if you move, you're gonna be using the same amount of force. Objects at rest always stay at rest, unless enacted upon by an object or something like that. And then there's like gravity's like negative 9.81 meters per second squared. Yeah, meters per second squared. That sounds about right. And then I remember like in physics class we had like a pendulum and stuff like that, and we had like I'm kind of just rattling off, but like they had like a pendulum, and like for like the pendulum, whenever it would swing, it would always go into the middle part like at a specific amount of time, and it would always be equally distributed. So as it got lower, they would both go the same amount of time until it stopped. It was pretty interesting. I actually fucked with pendulums. I'm not gonna lie, that show was fucking lit. But that's not related to this. I'm kind of just basically saying that like I'm not really that knowledgeable. I do know some scientific things. I'm not really that good with anatomy. I never took an anatomy class or anything like that. I was never that good at biology. And thinking about it just like off the top of my head logically, what would probably be relevant to like knowing how ivermectin would impact the body in COVID, you'd probably be looking at the human anatomy. You'd probably be looking at chemistry and biochemistry. I don't know if biochemistry would be it. I don't even know what fucking biochemistry is, but it sounds about right. It's fucking the life and chemistry. So life and chemistry. I mean, I don't really. It's like anatomy, biochemistry slash chemistry, uh, uh, biology. Systems, like how they interact with one another. There's probably some other stuff that I just don't fucking know about, but yeah, we're gonna be watching this video. I'm kind of just gonna be seeing if Dave can like teach me some things, or like, or if I can like, or if he like brings up some ideas out of my head, and like that would be pretty interesting. But I think that like he's generally pretty good on topics or whatnot. There is like I do understand that like he's dealing in a realm where like he's dealing with anti-science communicators that are trying to push uh distrust towards academia and science. So he's specifically not trying to give a lot of credit to people, but it's also because of the fact that like a lot of what they're saying is lying. So like even if they do have like some validity to their point, he will like essentially dismantle that. He'll essentially dismantle like any form of credibility, because like obviously the people he's talking to don't have any credibility, because these are specifically the type of people that are adamantly for like pushing anti-science propaganda, and like you know trying to make a Christian nationalist state, or just profiting off the misery and killing of others. They're not very good people, and Dave is doing his due diligence by uh, addressing them as he should. But we're gonna get into this video, see what's popping.
Hey everyone, most of you are aware of my recent live debate dunking on anti-vax charlatans Steve Kirsch and Pierre Kory. I promised follow-up videos on each of them to further expose their fraudulence, and with Steve already covered, we move on to Pierre. If you saw the carnage that was the live debate, you know exactly who Pierre is. But if you missed it and you haven't heard of him before, here's the quick rundown. Most of us became familiar with a drug called ivermectin during the pandemic, and the reason for that is Pierre Kory. Pierre is the ICU doctor turned misinformation mogul who has spent the last 5 years peddling ivermectin.
Ivermectin is an anti-parasite medication used to treat parasitic diseases, including parasitic worms, hookworm, whipworm, and other. So it's a treatment. Okay. So this would probably be like prescribed by a doctor. I'm assuming if it's a treatment. I'm assuming.
an anti-parasitic, as a miracle drug for COVID, even though he had no firm evidence for the claim when he first made it, and it was then quickly proven to be totally ineffective. He made a lot of money off of that grift, but any good grifter knows how to pivot when the time comes. So he eventually started branching into all manner of anti-vax conspiracies, bogus claims about measles deaths not being from measles, weaponized viruses, and more. You may remember from the debate how Pierre was trying to pretend that some kids who died of measles in Texas didn't actually die of measles. Then Dan and I humiliated him by explaining immune amnesia, where the measles virus destroys previously acquired immunity for a variety of pathogens.
So the measles enters the body. See right there, it enters the body, and then the virus is in the middle. And then the virus spreads to other parts of the body, the lungs and whatnot, and other tissues and other organs in the body. So it spreads everywhere, and then it enters the blood at what point? Enters the blood. Lymph node. Fucking hell. God damn it, I fucking hate not being good at biology. Basically, it's affecting the body, it seems like. And like it's causing all types of effects throughout the body. And like this is how like the virus like interacts with the body, I'm assuming. I don't know, fucking goddamn it, bro. This is pretty interesting though.
Bacteria, leading to severe secondary bacterial infections. So the bacteria he was whining about wouldn't have infected those kids if they hadn't been infected with measles, which wouldn't have happened if they had been vaccinated. More on that later when we illustrate how Pierre has shifted from lying about ivermectin to just peddling generalized science denial regarding vaccines and infectious diseases. He's also part of RFK's cabal of disinformation superspreaders, most of whom now sell snake oil, like Pierre's pal Mickey Willis and his measles treatment and prevention protocol, which is just a bunch of pointless supplements for hundreds of dollars. This is somehow supposed to be more desirable than preventing measles with the typically free MMR vaccine, which has been proven to be profoundly safe and effective for decades, to the point where measles had been declared eradicated until this most recent wave of extreme vaccine hesitancy, which has swept the nation thanks to frauds like Pierre. Now, the interesting thing is that Pierre Kory wasn't always this fringe grifter douchebag. He was once a legitimate ICU physician. He was board certified in critical care, pulmonary disease, and internal medicine. But then COVID hit, and for Pierre, so did the spotlight. In April of 2020, he co-founded the Frontline COVID-19 Critical Care Alliance, or FLCCC, with his colleague, Paul Merrick. He quoted this pulmonary disease
Chief of Critical Care Service and the Medical Director of Trauma and Life Support Center. Board Certified Specialist in Critical Care Medicine, Pulmonary Diseases, and Internal Medicine. I'm surprised he would be like the type of guy to switch over, but there's probably some reason to it that Dave's probably going to get into.
Or FLCCC, with his colleague, Paul Merrick. They published two protocols, Math Plus and iMask Plus, intended for treating hospitalized COVID patients and prevention of COVID illness, respectively. They specifically touted ivermectin as life-saving early in the pandemic, but as data began to shed doubt on its effectiveness, it quickly became obvious that this was nothing but a marketing scheme. Nevertheless, Pierre became a household name later that year when he testified before the U.S. Senate's Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, branding himself as a pharma whistleblower and declaring that ivermectin is effectively a miracle drug against COVID-19. This was his big moment, so let's get some highlights.
We have now come to the conclusion after 9 months, and I have to point out, I am severely troubled by the fact that the NIH, the FDA, and the CDC, I do not know of any task force that was assigned or compiled to review repurposed drugs in an attempt to treat this disease. Everything has been about novel and or expensive pharmaceutically engineered drugs, things like tocilizumab and remdesivir and monoclonal antibodies and vaccines. There is a drug that is proving to be of miraculous impact. And when I say miracle, I do not use that term lightly. and I don't want to be sensationalized when I say that, that is a scientific recommendation based on mountains of data that has emerged in the last 3 months. When I am told, and I just had to hear this in the opening sentence, that we are touting things that are not FDA or NIH recommended, let me be clear. The NIH, their recommendation on ivermectin, which is to not use it outside of controlled trials, is from August 27th. We are now in December. This is 3 to 4 months later. Mountains of data have emerged from many centers and countries around the world
Don't you need the
showing
fucking drug to
the
be
miraculous.
Don't you need the fucking drug to like? So say for instance, if the fucking if like the fucking experts in the government are like, we want to explore different options to figure out the best way to treat the fucking virus that's fucking destroying the fucking country. Like, don't the experts have to like if like say for instance ivermectin was the miracle cure, like don't you have to like look into that and like if the experts are like, okay, we want to like, all right, we think that we can move this further, we can actually use a clinical trial which is testing it on actual people. Like, cause I'm pretty sure like you have to like test this shit like extensively before you move it to a market or like for like testing on fucking people. It doesn't seem like, I don't think that like drugs are, I don't know though, but I don't think drugs are fucking just being fucking just sold on over to people just for them to use nilly-willy. I think that there's probably a little bit more hesitancy than that.
Effectiveness of ivermectin. It basically obliterates transmission of this virus. If you take it, you will not get sick. We have evidence that ivermectin is effective not only in prophylaxis, in the prevention. If you take it, you will not get sick. We just came across a trial last night from Argentina by the lead investigator of ivermectin in Argentina, Dr. Hector Carvalho. They prophylaxed 800 healthcare workers. Not one got sick. We now have 4 large randomized controlled trials totaling over 1,500 patients, each trial showing that as a prophylaxis agent, it is immensely effective. You will not get sick. You will be protected from getting ill if you take it. In early outpatient treatment, we have 3 randomized controlled trials and multiple observation as well as case series showing that if you take ivermectin, the need for hospitalization and death will decrease. It is proving to be a wonder drug. It is critical for its use in this disease. Any further deaths are going to be needless deaths, and I cannot be traumatized by that. I am not here as a politician or a dramatist or sensationalizing what I'm recommending.
How Dave is treating
this guy. You know who's dying here?
But
it's our African American and Latino
it's kind of annoying
and
that fucking dumbasses like this get to exist in my fucking dumbass country.
Members of our society.
And they face zero consequences, whereas like if they did this in Europe, they would get fucking
it's the most severe discrepancy I've seen in my medical career.
And they would have to fucking
and we are responsible to protect
those
those
disadvantaged members. Jailed and in prison for the rest of their lives for what they do.
To provide countermeasures.
In the U.S., they just kind of just
the amount of evidence to show that ivermectin is
fuck.
life-saving and protective is so immense, and the drug is so safe. My colleagues have talked about it. It must be instituted and implemented. I'm asking the NIH to review our data and come up with recommendations for society.
Pretty bold claims there, Pierre. There's just one problem. His so-called evidence came exclusively from unreviewed preprints, low-quality observational studies, and unverifiable anecdotes. What he called mountains of data collapsed into dust the moment anyone actually followed up on anything. Plenty of professionals spoke up to expose Pierre's lies, but since Dan Wilson of Debunk the Funk so masterfully humiliated Pierre in our debate, let's give him the honors this time around as well. This video is from December of 2020, about a week after Pierre ran his mouth.
Currently, there are no published, peer-reviewed studies showing that this drug, ivermectin, has any effectiveness in preventing COVID-19. However, there are a few preprint studies that show that there might be an effect here. Now, keep in mind, these papers are not peer-reviewed. That does not make them wrong, but it does mean we should be cautious in interpreting their meaning. So with that in mind, when we read the results of these papers, we can see that even though their sample sizes are small, there does appear to be a decrease in COVID cases in groups that were treated with ivermectin. So right away, 2 takeaways we can see from these studies is that, 1, It is not 100% effective. So this doctor saying that if you take ivermectin, you will not get sick is sensationalist, that is misleading, and he should not be saying that. We can also see that there might be an effect here, but we don't know for sure. These results are far from conclusive, and we would have to see much larger studies in order to make any strong conclusions and recommendations based off those results.
They prophylaxed 800 healthcare workers. Not one got sick.
I can't find this paper published on any preprint server or anywhere, so I can't really comment on it, which means that he probably shouldn't be talking about it in front of Congress because, again, it's not peer-reviewed and it's not verified by the scientific community yet.
It is proving to be a wonder drug.
No, it's not, and the simple reason is that the evidence is much too thin at this point to be making such a huge statement. Not only are the existing studies few in number and low in quality, but another thing that complicates these results is that these patients weren't just receiving ivermectin, they were also receiving other medications alongside it. So it's hard to say how effective ivermectin really is in these cases. At the end of the day, we just need more studies in order to say whether or not it's effective. And we certainly can't say that it's a wonder drug. I mean, don't say that.
Please, I'm just asking that they review our manuscript.
And like we said, that takes time. Submitted manuscripts are being reviewed, and more clinical trials are underway. But he knows that, which is why it's hard for me to believe that he's not here as a dramatist to sensationalize the idea that this medicine might have some effect in treating COVID-19. I can't say why he's doing this, but I can say that it is utterly irresponsible.
As you can see, Pierre's testimony wasn't about any scientific breakthrough. It was the official launch of the FLCCC's iMask Plus protocol, a cocktail of vitamins, melatonin, and ivermectin that Pierre baselessly claimed could prevent and cure COVID. It was a marketing campaign, hence the precise sensationalism he explicitly claimed he wasn't engaging in. He said there were over 20 well-designed studies, 10 randomized, all showing dramatic benefits. That's a lie. Not embellishment, not hyperbole, it's a lie. There were 0 randomized controlled trials at the time that he made that statement. Dan proved this in my video on the debate. There was no peer-reviewed research of any kind demonstrating what Pierre is claiming at the time that he gave this testimony. None. Just a handful of unpublished preprints with small sample sizes and without proper randomization that didn't control for confounders like other medications taken simultaneously, and even those hinted at minor or inconsistent effects. Not the sweeping 100% prevention claim he pulled out of his asshole while under oath. Not a mountain of data, not even a molehill, just a house of cards. And he made sure to sell the idea of prophylaxis, or action taken to prevent disease, in addition to treatment. This is because he knew that he'd make the most money by convincing people to take ivermectin every week for an indefinite period of time. And it gets worse. Independent reviews later confirmed that many of the preliminary studies Pierre was referencing were misrepresented or outright fraudulent. For example, the Egyptian El Ghazar et al. Preprint he leaned on was retracted for concerns regarding data fabrication and plagiarism. I wonder why someone would do a thing like that. Another example, which ended up being the nail in the coffin for his Math Plus protocol, was his inaccurate reporting of data from Centara Norfolk General Hospital, which called him out for misreporting hospital mortality data. This passage explains in detail how Pierre fabricated the figures he reported, so I'll link to this retraction notice if you want to read the whole thing, plus a few other notices of retractions, corrections, and expressions of concern from major journals. Didn't think the hospital would catch you telling lies, eh, Pierre? This is where a normal person, temporarily led astray by delusions of grandeur, would bite the bullet, accept the loss, and quietly back away from the spotlight. But not Pierre. Now firmly committed to his new grifting lifestyle, he decided to bitch about it endlessly on the internet, acting like a complete toddler and blaming everyone else rather than taking responsibility for his lies like a fucking adult. Never-ending tweets spewing jargon to try to muddy the waters and provide some kind of plausible narrative as to how everyone is wrong but him, complete with non-stop whining about mainstream collective thinking and censorship of alternative alternative approach is. Apart from this narrative being objectively false, since cheap generics like dexamethasone, the precise thing he is pretending was prevented by evil money-grubbing pharma, this is just the general script a grifter uses to get the
It's really telling how they'll fucking just use the fucking. They'll use fucking what do you call those type of words? Is that fucking just sensationalist or like martyrdom type language where like it's like the victim that's fighting like the bully or the fucking the knight that's fighting the evil doers or whatever. Like it's just trying to like paint this like picture as in like he's working on behalf of the people when this guy's literally just fucking scamming and lying and fucking getting people killed. It's a fucking mass murderer getting people fucking killed. I mean, that's fucking crazy. I wonder if it's always been like this. Well, I guess people, it's probably a lot easier to get away with it beforehand. Niggas didn't have technology like this, I guess.
the gullible masses to accept their lies over the facts that are agreed upon by every expert in the world. Look at this pathetic Twitter interaction with Andrew Hill, whose meta-analysis Pierre cited to claim ivermectin works. Hill reevaluated his work after studies in the meta-analysis were shown to be fraudulent, so he set the record straight. In response, Pierre throws a public tantrum, accuses a diligent researcher of being a paid shill, gets a shit ton of likes and retweets, and what happens? Daily death threats to Andrew Hill and his entire team. This happened to healthcare workers everywhere. Constant harassment, which contributed to increased healthcare worker burnout and mental health issues during the pandemic. You have earnest public health servants throwing themselves off the roof of hospitals due to the trauma of being surrounded by a sea of death, most of which could have been prevented by vaccination once available. And the ones who stuck it out were harassed endlessly by the minions of frauds like Pierre, who capitalized on human lives to fill his own pockets. This is what the anti-vax cult is. They clutch their pearls about imaginary corruption that claims millions of imaginary lives, while at the same time physically threatening the lives of well-intentioned medical professionals actually helping real people in the real world. The delusion and hypocrisy is off the charts. So to summarize, when the noise was stripped away from Pierre's bullshit claims, systematic reviews, including Cochrane's in 2022, found no reliable evidence that ivermectin prevented infection, shortened illness, or saved lives, which has since been echoed by the World Health Organization and National Institutes of Health, which only recommended use in clinical trials. The medical community, being as open-minded as it is, did indeed run large double-blind randomized controlled trials, like the Active 6 sample size of 1,300 and Together sample size of 1,500. These studies confirmed the same result. Ivermectin offers no meaningful benefit in the context of recovery, hospitalization, or death. The better and more thorough the science, the weaker the results became. Countless studies, low dose, high dose, early treatment, extended treatment, you name it. Every legitimate study showed that ivermectin does jack shit to treat or prevent COVID. Even Pierre's mechanistic pitch that ivermectin kills the virus in vitro turned out to rely on lab doses more than 35 times higher than what people actually observe in blood after oral ingestion while fasting. Here's the study Pierre was flexing. Inhibits replication of the virus in vitro. Then the follow-up study, which shows that the concentration...
You know, I need to look this shit up because something's not making sense. Like, if the doctors don't, like, want them to use it, is it, like, how are they getting, how are these clinical trials, like, happening? Like, is it just people just, I know clinical trials, like, you sign up for it and, like, you sign, like, something and, like, you know you're not gonna, you may not get the treatment or whatever. But, like, why would people sign up for this? I'm actually kind of curious. Because it seems like they actually are testing it on people. It's not, like, animals or anything. I'm gonna look it up. Okay, so what it seems like they're doing is they're not, the study that was cited, or like one of the studies I was looking at in Malaysia, it seems like there's a bureaucracy where like the health officials have to, they have to get approval to like have the clinical trial, and I'm pretty sure there's probably some more hoops but basically they have to get approval from the government to run the trials, and then there are certain parameters that are already set in place to like make sure that they're not just fucking causing mass death. Like they still have to follow certain health procedures. and they follow those procedures, and it's not like they're just giving them this fake drug that doesn't work. They're giving them the drug that works, and they're also giving them the treatment. So like they're giving them the control and the treatment versus like, you know, just getting like the normal treatment. So it's not just like, it's not, I thought, from my point of view, I thought it was them just like, you know, sending them like one person like is getting the treatment. Because I remember in statistics class, I remember there's treatments and then there's controls. So the control is not like nothing in this situation. The control is like the normal treatment that you would have gotten. So you get the normal treatment that you would have gotten, and ivermectin, and you also on the control is just the standard treatment. So it's actually a lot more safe than I thought it was. So it looks like my concerns are kind of alleviated.
Concentrations with inhibitory effects were 35 times greater than the maximum plasma concentrations. That's an amount that would kill a person. And rest assured, people did overdose and die from ivermectin. Funny how there's no outrage for those casualties, huh? So when Pierre told Congress that all studies show positive statistically significant benefits, that was a lie. He was lying. Like a liar. The reality is the precise opposite. From a starting point of unverifiable weak evidence, the better the trials got, the smaller the effect became, until it vanished altogether. Pierre's insistence that ivermectin obliterates transmission wasn't just totally baseless, it was reckless, and it was a claim that was made with one result in mind: profit. His testimony was a free commercial for his grift, which promptly landed him on the conspiracy podcast circuit with frauds like Brett Weinstein and gullible idiots like Joe Rogan, which Pierre milked for all they're worth to launch his business hawking ivermectin on the internet, which made him filthy rich by the time the pandemic died down. And here we are in 2025. Despite Pierre's continued insistence that ivermectin is the bee's knees for COVID, in the reality shared by professionals who care about facts, ivermectin's obituary is official. Annals 2025, no effect on outcomes in 7,035 patients. Antibiotics 2025, no difference in viral clearance. Cochrane 2025, low certainty evidence, no measurable benefit. In other words, Pierre's miracle never materialized. He calls it censorship. The rest of us call it accountability. Science didn't silence him. In fact, every jerk who claims they're being censored seems to be shouting about it on every gigantic platform they can find. Science looked at his claims and found them to be objectively false. And lying is the least of Pierre's transgressions. As we said, his relentless promotion of ivermectin for profit contributed immeasurable harm. Let's start with the poisonings. Dozens of very serious adverse reactions, including a handful of deaths, and this is limited to what was reported to one particular database. Here's a report from Oregon of 5 people hospitalized from ivermectin use. Then from September 2021, we can see official reports that the doses recommended by frauds on the internet are way too high and can cause health problems. Does any of that stop the anti-vax cult from endangering themselves with ludicrous doses of an off-label drug while endangering others by not getting vaccinated? Of course not. If experts say it, it must be a lie, you stupid sheep. Then let's not forget that ivermectin is a legitimate drug with an important function as an anti-parasitic. Do you think that many thousands of people getting tricked into buying it to treat COVID could result in some kind of shortage of the drug for people who actually need it for their parasitic infections? Of course it would. Increased demand caused shortages for patients with scabies and other parasites, and this disproportionately impacted vulnerable populations, the ones Pierre made a point to reference, as though he gives a shit about any particular demographic and wasn't just white knighting for social karma points. Then don't forget all the thousands of victims who couldn't find ivermectin for people because it was in short supply, so they went with veterinary ivermectin instead. Countless simpletons flocked farm and feed supply stores, bought this stuff and took it like it was for people, which also caused a wave of overdoses, as well as shortages for livestock that need it. FDA and CDC issued warnings about this activity, even trying their best to speak directly on the level of these morons.
You are not a cow. Seriously, y'all, stop it. Honestly, like, I didn't even hear about any of this stuff. I'm like, this is like a lot more serious than like what I thought it was. Like, I mean, that's kind of crazy. I don't even know what to fucking make of all this shit, bro. I'm supposed to be fucking reacting to this shit. And like Dave is like giving like some pretty useful information, but what the fuck is even happening, bro? Like they're fucking like it's like there's like a fucking parrot or like with like a loud microphone and like it's fucking just like kill your or not like die. And like people are just like kill. Like I don't know, man. Like it's like I don't know. It's like people are being like mind possessed or something like that. They're just like, and it seems like it's not like it's this is like a wide section of society that follows people like this that are so much to the point where like they believe that they need to take like drugs that are meant for animals and stuff like that. It's, like this is literally crazy to me. But yeah, let's keep going.
With tweets reading, "You are not a horse. You are not a cow. Seriously, y'all, stop it." Should have been pretty relatable, no? Even idiot anti-vaxxers understand that they are not horses, right? But no, the evil government is lying again. Grab that horse paste and lather yourself up, Cletus. Poison centers were inundated with calls due to veterinary ivermectin misuse. Many patients were hospitalized and some died. And then, most importantly, delayed care. Thousands of unvaccinated people with COVID fell for the ivermectin scam, waited patiently while their condition worsened for pills to come in the mail that weren't going to help them at all, and weeks later, in critical condition, finally realizing that ivermectin doesn't do shit against COVID, it was too late. Nobody at the hospital could help them. They gasped their last few breaths in a state of confused panic, and they died. We may never know precisely how many people fit this description, but it is a huge number. Obviously, I would never suggest that anecdotal evidence is some kind of gold standard, but it's worth something, and there are countless testimonies from healthcare providers outlining the overwhelming number of cases of delayed care where people arrived at the hospital already in critical condition because they attempted to self-treat with unproven remedies like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. The disinformation spread by Pierre and others like him claimed a lot of lives, and he has zero remorse about it because he's a grifting, money-hungry sociopath. Was there any backlash for this jerk? Of course there was. In August 2024, the American Board of Internal Medicine revoked the medical certifications of Pierre Kory and Paul Merrick for spreading COVID misinformation. That's the medical community's version of a red card for fouling the facts. When you continue to tell millions that ivermectin obliterates COVID, even after mountains of high-quality evidence shows otherwise, you're not just wrong, you're lying. And you're dangerous. If you were in the ICU, intubated, critically ill, and unable to consent to anything, would you want Pierre doing experimental treatments on you for self-enrichment, treating you like an expendable statistic for his own personal gain, withholding treatments with good evidence of success because of his own fucked up agenda? Of course not. That's why Pierre isn't allowed to be a doctor anymore. Not because Big Pharma, Rockefeller, academia, something, but common sense doesn't stop frauds like Pierre from leaning even harder into their grift. After all, when mainstream science tries to cancel you, it can only be because your truth is way too truthy for them to handle, right? Fast forward to present day, and Pierre has officially gone full anti-vax crank. He sells books full of lies. He promotes spike detox supplements like nattokinase, the one that made Steve Kirsch blind in one eye, even though Pierre denied it during our debate. He charges outrageous fees for telehealth and vaccine injury sessions. Here's his Twitter profile, which advertises telehealth right at the top. And here's his website, with all the consultation types listed, including one for medications on hand, where he hawks his bogus products. And of course, he's now quite the public figure, given his heroic fight to save the masses from evil Big Pharma. So he frequently speaks at events like the very recent Children's Health Defense Moment of Truth conference. This is the propaganda organization that RFK Jr. led for 8 years, on the way to becoming the world's most powerful and influential anti-vaxxer. And he has essentially become the Pied Piper of anti-vax frauds at this point, with virtually every grifting anti-vaxxer on the internet getting brought into the fold. Let's check out the roster for this little PR stunt, conference. There's Joseph Ladapo, the Florida Surgeon General who compares vaccine mandates to slavery. This is the dickhead who, along with Governor Ron DeSantis, is in the process of repealing vaccine mandates for school children for all of Florida, which will 100% result in child
You guys are
deaths.
fucking fascists,
Senators Ron
fucking
Johnson and Rand
dumbasses.
Paul, who accused Fauci of creating the coronavirus and being a traitor to the United States who should be jailed for life. A video about the cartoonish Fauci fervor is coming soon. Russell Brand, the English comedian who got caught sexually assaulting and raping everything that moves, so he found Jesus and pivoted to conservative grifting, since the right protects rapists and pedophiles, especially if they're white and Christian. I covered this douchebag in one of my Terry videos, so watch that for some laughs. Suzanne Humphreys, the fraud who appeared on Joe Rogan pushing medical history misinformation, claiming vaccines are harmful and useless, and that polio isn't even a real virus. She will probably get her own video at some point. Del Bigtree, full-time conspiracy broadcaster and general pile of human excrement, who is the CEO of anti-vax group ICANN, and who produced the garbage pseudo-documentary Vaxxed, based on Andrew Wakefield's bullshit. Speaking of whom, Andrew Wakefield is there too, the disgraced former doctor behind the fake MMR autism link, based on one fraudulent retracted study, which required that he physically abuse children. A non-existent link that will never die, no matter how many times it's debunked. I've done that twice myself, and people still worship this worthless criminal. Peter McCullough, the one who pushes the spike protein detox supplements we talked about that made Steve Kirsch go blind in one eye, and who is behind the recent weaponization of predatory journals to try and bring fringe claims into the mainstream. His video is coming soon. Brett Weinstein, the pointless podcaster who pretends to be a scientific genius that I've debunked to smithereens in several videos, along with his idiot brother Eric, both of whom are on the Peter Thiel payroll. Let's not forget RFK's wife Cheryl, who is there for some reason. It's a star-studded affair. Pierre didn't get top billing, surprisingly, so he's down here without a picture. And even little Stevie Kirsch is in the fine print at the bottom. His set must be in the Sahara tent or something. Neither of these jerks are main stage material. Honestly, I'm shocked Joe Rogan isn't on here, since he lives in Austin, and he would give them some great promo. Anyway, as you can see, Pierre has no interest in maintaining the company of legitimate doctors and scientists anymore. He's surrounded by podcasters and get-rich-quick conspiracy entrepreneurs, and this setting fits him like a glove. There's almost nothing too stupid for Pierre to amplify at this point, since his legitimate career is long behind him. He reposts dog-shit takes like this crap from Steve Kirsch, claiming that vaccines make you gay and trans. Surveys are awesome, right? I wonder if he saw my recent work exposing all the cases of vaccine-induced turbopenis, also via anonymous survey. Here's a post where he says Native Americans are saying the quiet part out loud, that COVID vaccines are biological weapons of mass destruction. And they would know best, right? They don't...
You know what? I've kind of been thinking about this. How much more video? Fucking hell, I've barely even fucking touched this damn shit. But honestly, to me, like, black people have a lot of distrust towards the government. Like, thinking back to that other guy. So, like, he's able to, like, he's obviously not fucking stupid. He might be stupid enough to, like, believe what he's saying. But more than likely, he's not that fucking stupid. And his like, argumentation works with a specific type of black person that has always been, you know, working hard, you know. They prey on, like, you know, certain characteristics, like, you know, fatigue and you know, emotional problems, or you know, life issues, like, and this fits to, like, a certain type of person that, like, sees fucking American society as representing white people, which in some ways is true, but we're looking at, like, science and medicine, like this is largely outside of, like, you know, like, some snippets of history, like the Tuskegee experiments. This is largely meant to be beneficial for Americans and subsequently all people in society. Like, health is not supposed to be, in essence, politicized. It's supposed to be for the benefit of people. But when you target these vulnerable people who have these biases or experiences, it's very easy to mislead them, and it's a big problem for African Americans from my own experience. But that's anecdotal, of course. But let's keep going. It's kind of crazy.
Don't need medical knowledge. They're natural healing wizards with magic powers. Don't listen to every doctor in the world. Listen to Leaping Ram. And why not return to his idiotic claims that those kids who died of measles didn't really die of measles? Claims like this can be found on all the alt-health propaganda websites. Texas girl died from a hospital-acquired superbug, not measles. The hospital killed her, you guys. Measles isn't even real. In our debate, he went on a long rant where he pretended to have been officially tasked with finding the cause of death for these kids, though upon interrogation, he admitted that he just scoured for medical records and made up his own bullshit conclusion. He whined about antibiotics being stopped early in her second hospital stay, while simultaneously acknowledging that the pneumonia was antibiotic resistant, which would make the antibiotics useless and deliver nothing but unwanted side effects. He whined about several other particulars in protocol, who knows which aspects are even true, but the main point remains that pneumonia was contracted because of a weakened immune system due to measles infection, since measles infects memory B and T cells and destroys antibodies, including the ones that protect against bacterial pathogens. If she had gotten the MMR vaccine, she would not have gotten the measles, she wouldn't have had her immune system ravaged, she would never have been admitted to the hospital, so she would not have gotten pneumonia, and she would not have died. The child in question would still be alive if she had been vaccinated. And yet, the propaganda campaign against safe and effective vaccines rages on. What are the consequences? More measles outbreaks. There's one happening right now in Utah. Dozens of cases. Arizona too. Numerous hospitalizations, primarily children, all unvaccinated. No deaths yet, but if the MAGA minions get their way in Florida, plenty of deaths are coming. And if other states follow suit, we will have an enormous problem on our hands. Anybody who willingly allows children to die should be in jail for life, and one day there will be retribution for all these worthless piles of human filth. So that's what's left of Pierre Kory. Stripped of his credentials, he can't refer to himself as a doctor anymore, so he's been recast as a victim of big pharma censorship, and a hero in the conspiracy zeitgeist, a small group of vicious, persistent grifters that have infected millions of people with a mind virus that renders them incapable of seeing their heroes for the lying frauds they truly are. These are hypocrites like Pierre, a former ICU physician who knows precisely what these diseases can do, and why we need to prevent them from ever returning by rigorously vaccinating to achieve herd immunity. This is an infant with pertussis. This is what whooping cough looks like.
Okay. It's okay. Okay, take a breath in, honey. Come on. Almost there. There we go. Oh my. It's okay. It's okay. Yeah.
This is what Pierre wants to see more of. He wants thousands of children to die of preventable illnesses by fear-mongering about the entire vaccine schedule so that our ability to prevent them is eroded, only to then push treatments that don't do a fucking thing. About 160,000 children die of pertussis each year, though typically only 10 or so in the US because we have DTaP vaccines. But when people stop vaccinating their children, these diseases come back. Pierre knows the social cost of claiming that literally all vaccines are harmful, an insane generalization that he made emphatically right at the top of our debate. How is it that we're always fixating on the COVID vaccine and then all of these people here that are supporting you are just magically against all vaccines, right? If you're not anti-vaxxers, how did that happen exactly?
I'll help you out. It's all of them. Keep going.
Huh?
It's
Okay.
all of them. Keep going.
Okay, so he admits it.
Okay,
So
so
you are just against all vaccines.
Yeah.
But he says it anyway because it suits his interests. Pierre overstates data or fabricates it, refuses to admit fault when exposed, and just monetizes the outrage.
These guys would be there's no way, like, in no other country, nobody could get away with what they do. Like, these guys would be in prison for life. These would be... I can't even say like what would happen to them. Like these guys will not be like in society anymore in the way they exist. Like no way, no way. House arrest, imprisonment, detention. Like these guys would be. They don't deserve to get away with what they do. Like it's fucking crazy. These guys are fucking mass murderers.
Rage. When all the double-blind randomized controlled trials prove him wrong and ivermectin's miraculous abilities evaporate into thin air, all that's left is the grift. Books, telehealth, sketchy podcast appearances, and pseudo-conference circuits that sell validation to the gullible people who were never interested in reality in the first place. Let's wrap things up by getting some commentary from a few professionals. First, let's talk to Gideon Meyerovitz-Katz. He's a senior research fellow in epidemiology at the University of Wollongong in Sydney, Australia, who has quite a bit to say about the COVID pandemic and ivermectin in particular. In fact, he has authored research regarding the efficacy of ivermectin, specifically examining the effects of medical fraud on how this data is reported. So his expertise will be quite welcome here. Gideon, thanks so much for joining us. I'm pretty eager to get the benefit of some of your expertise here. I know that you have a number of publications addressing the efficacy of ivermectin against COVID, but also you've done a lot of work addressing retractions, corrections, fraudulent studies as they pertain to ivermectin. So I'd love to just turn it over to you to talk about all of that in whatever capacity you think would be useful.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so my main job is I'm an epidemiologist. I've been doing that for quite a long time now. My side gig, I like to call it, or one of the things that I do is look into, we call it unreliable research. Unreliable research is a broad term, and it kind of relates to studies that are made unreliable for a variety of reasons. And the reason we say unreliable is because someone like myself who's reading a study or looking at the data cannot necessarily say with any certainty what happened. You know, we're not following people with cameras. But we can say for sure that study didn't happen as it was described, or there are significant errors that get in the way of us using that as evidence. I've personally been responsible for retracting somewhere in the region of 100 studies so far. And not all of those, or a substantial minority of those, were definitely not fraudulent. But in many cases, the authors didn't do what they said they did in the paper. Mm-hmm. So there was one case where I was involved in a study where it was very obvious that the randomization had completely failed, and the authors had described it as a randomized study. It had been published as a randomized study. But you could very easily tell from the baseline characteristics of both of the groups of these randomized groups that they were not randomly allocated, and the authors admitted very quickly when the journal put to them that, in fact, they hadn't randomized the groups, and so the journal decided to retract. The author said that was unfair at the time, but you know, this is how it goes.
Yeah.
So when I did a lot less of this actually before the pandemic, because I was very naive to the possibility that science could be faked or could be significantly problematic. I had a great deal of trust in the peer review system. But when the pandemic came around, I saw quite a lot of this. I was involved. If you've heard about Surgisphere,
yes,
I was involved to some extent in the uncovering the fraud there. The Surgisphere was this company that claimed to have this huge database of hospital records, and also claimed that hydroxychloroquine was killing people. Yeah, and they published several very big papers in the Lancet and the New England Journal of Medicine. And in one of the papers, they said they had data from Australia, and I'm Australian, and I looked at that data and I said, that's not possible. We don't have that many cases of COVID in hospital in Australia, so that they can't have that data. And I sent that to a journalist who then investigated the company, and that led to the whole scam falling apart.
So what was the motivation in that particular case?
Look, I think in most cases that I've come across, it's hard to know precisely what the authors are thinking, but the most likely motivation for people to do stuff like this is career advancement. Publishing a journal, any paper that you publish in the New England Journal of Medicine will basically guarantee a successful academic career. Having a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine and the Lancet, and another one coming in the BMJ, puts you at like the top tier of researchers in America.
And if it's a
or the world.
bombshell, a highly publicized, something that's very highly relevant to public health, that goes that way. Because it's interesting, obviously, fraudulent studies that would indicate efficacy of a particular drug. I understand the financial motivation there. But yeah, you're just saying, just generally, any any interesting research that will put you on a headline, there's a motivation there.
So an interesting point, and I think this is commonly misunderstood. I would say the vast majority of fraud currently is not for financial motivation, and certainly not in the pharmaceutical, in studies run by pharmaceutical companies. And the reason for that is not because pharmaceutical companies are good or because there's any lack of motivation. It's just because they're very, very highly regulated. If you have someone looking over your shoulder at your data and you have to give all of your information to an independent statistician who's not paid by your company, you cannot allow there to be any fraud, because the second there is even a suggestion that you've done anything incorrect, they'll audit your company and they'll find every mistake you've ever made, and that'll be terrible. So I think the FDA requiring pharmaceutical companies to provide them data really limited the amount of fraud that the industry got away with. Now that the FDA is being gutted, I wonder if it's going to start skyrocketing in the future.
Yeah.
Anyway, but the vast majority of misconduct that I have personally seen does not appear to have a straightforward financial motivation. Like, the researchers don't own a drug company producing this drug. Most of the time, it's people who've confected results simply, and it appears to be simply to get citations to build up an academic career.
Right. So how would you characterize very early research regarding ivermectin that Pierre Kory was referencing? Obviously, we know now that there were no RCTs, but he was basing his rhetoric on something. Would you regard that research as misled or poorly done, or specifically fraudulent, or what was retracted, what was corrected? Let's talk about sort of that early phase.
Sure. So this is a fascinating question. I have to say, I haven't spoken about ivermectin much in years. Hasn't really been an issue. And I understand it's becoming more of an issue in America because of the current administration. So it's very interesting to be asked about all this again.
Yeah.
The very earliest ivermectin fraud was Surgisphere. I referenced earlier. It was this fake company. They claimed to have hundreds or thousands of hospitals across the world, and they faked a paper that they published on the Lancet's preprint server, it's SSRN, Social Studies Research Network. It's now owned by the Lancet. It wasn't originally their preprint server. And they faked a paper saying that ivermectin worked incredibly well. That paper was based on some preclinical work done in Australia, showing that very, very high doses of ivermectin killed COVID-19. So the idea, and that paper, to be clear, that paper had a serious impact. There are news stories from mid 2020 talking about how when that paper on SSRN, when they deleted it from the server and it was retracted, there had already been governments. I think the government of Peru based their policy decisions on that paper by Surgisphere. So a lot of the follow-on came directly from this fraud. A lot of the reason why we are even talking about ivermectin, not all of it, because ivermectin was always a popular choice for people to sort of focus on. It's an incredibly safe drug, and it works really, really well for the thing that it works for, which is killing parasites. Yeah, it's an incredibly effective, incredibly safe drug that's literally all but eliminated several diseases from humanity. And there was some preclinical work that showed that it might help with COVID, maybe. So there was always going to be some focus on ivermectin, but I think that the massive international concept, the fact that you've got these hundreds or millions of people looking into it, is because of that fraudulent Surgisphere paper that we know just completely fake. And then what happened was you got a series of these papers, mostly published on preprint servers, that appeared to then show, I would call them, I don't know the best word, monumental benefits for ivermectin. So when Pierre Kory so I don't know what specific quote you're referencing there, but when Dr. Kory was talking to, I think it was the U.S. Congress or someone in the U.S. government in November 2020,
Yeah.
and called it a perfect medicine. There's that quote that went viral online.
Yeah, miraculous.
Yeah, miraculous, right? He was specifically referring to um, a group of studies that had been published online, mostly on preprint servers at that point, as well as some of this sort of less robust evidence, such as the fraudulent surgisphere study. I think there was also at that point there was a business consultant who'd done like an MBA, who had done what he called a multi-country analysis or something, and posted it online. And so I assume I don't know precisely what Pierre Kory was referring to in the moment, but I assume it was a collation of that sort of evidence.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine what percentage of that was specifically queuing up this ivermectin industry, right? As opposed to just sort of bad science, generally bad science. It perhaps we'll never know.
Personally, myself, I have always assumed good faith in people because it's rare that people who promote medications, even people who own drug companies, it's rare that they think that they are solely in it for the money. Maybe, in the back of their mind, but you look at interviews with Pfizer's CEO, and Pfizer has, regardless of how fantastic the vaccine is and was, they have profiteered enormously from the pandemic and done some things that they should be ashamed of. And the CEO is passionate, very earnest, passionate, saying he's saving lives in every interview. And so I think most people see themselves as the heroes of their own stories, and that's the way we should probably assume they behave.
Well, and they did save lives, and then they maybe do other things that are bad. But I think that people at that level have an ability to appear earnest, maybe when they're not entirely. I don't know. I don't want to speculate on him in particular.
Anyway, yeah. So I don't think I'm not going to comment on the reasons for people's behavior. But so to go back to the research, right? What happened was I saw a bunch of this research popping up late 2020. I saw the viral meme, and I thought that seems a bit silly. These studies are bad. You can tell that they're bad just by a quick look. There was a study by a guy called Hector Carvalho in Argentina. At that point, wasn't looking into misconduct or any sort of unreliability. I just looked at the paper posted online, and it was a very obviously predatory journal, and the study didn't make sense. A lot of the writing in it was just bizarre, and I said no one who has ever done a scientific degree would believe that this is that this is worth basing their opinions on. And then we fast forward to June, July 2021. Ivermectin is going mega viral, or even May 2021, I think it might have been. And a master's student called Jack in the UK, he was doing his master's degree, and he looked at a study, one of the biggest study at that point, so 600-person RCT that had been posted on a preprint server called research. Oh no, I can't even remember the name of the preprint server now. I apologize, but it was a study by a man called Mohammed El-Ghazar and his team. And Jack noticed that the paper had a bunch of plagiarism in it, and it was fairly obvious plagiarism, particularly in the methods. That's really bad because if you've plagiarized your methods, it calls into question whether you actually did the things that you say you did in your methods. And the plagiarism was not concealed. Basically, the entire introduction, the entire methods, large parts of the discussion had just been copied from previous pieces of research that were publicly available online. And so he sent, and then the next thing Jack did was he went to look at the data for the study, because it said the data is available online by request. And the data for this study was available on a link. If you go to this website, and it was this super dodgy website, if you click to the link, there were a million ads, and it said, here's the data, you need a password to download this data. So you have to ask the lead researcher to get the data. But then underneath that was a button that said, if you pay $10 to our company, you can download the data even without the permission of the lead researcher. Not a great idea to do that if you're the researcher in question. So Jack did it, and he downloaded the data. The password, the Excel spreadsheet was password protected, but the password was 1234. And so he also had access to the data. And so he sent all this information to Nick Brown, who's probably the leading expert in scientific error detection and fraud analysis in the world. He also sent it to me. I don't know why he sent it to me, because I'm much less. I was certainly at that point much less experienced than Nick. Anyway, and asked us what we. Sorry.
But vocal online, so I think you can be traced to various Twitter threads and be.
Yeah, right. Probably because of Twitter. Yeah. Anyway, he sent it to both of us, and we had a look. And I went and I downloaded the data sheet separately myself, as did Nick. You know, you pay $10 and get the data yourself just to be thorough. And that data sheet was very clearly fake. We posted all the details publicly online at the time, but that specifically the data sheet, it had patients who had been who died before the study started. It had multiple repeating patients. It had all sorts of characteristics that were not consistent with real patient data. And so, long story short, the study was retracted. It was definitely the most, I would say, the most obvious case of unreliability that I've worked on. Maybe not the most obvious, but one of the most obvious, because it had everything. You know, it had plagiarism, it had impossibilities in the publication alone, and then it had a data spreadsheet which was very, very fake. Or rather, I shouldn't. Fake is a complicated word. I would say it was not consistent with a study done on real people, and certainly not consistent with the study that they reported having done. And that was the biggest study at the time. So 600 people, the only study above 200 people at the time, and it was complete nonsense. And you remove that one study. So at the time, Dr. Kory and a group of his colleagues had published a systematic review and meta-analysis looking at ivermectin. You remove that one study from the equation, and suddenly the picture dramatically changed. Instead of this huge benefit, you're looking at a much smaller benefit that was either not statistically significant or just barely statistically significant, depending on how you analyze the data. And that made a big difference. And because of this study, then myself, Nick Brown, James Heathers, and Kyle Sheldrick, who are another two people who work in the fraud and integrity space, and Jack, we all went and we looked at all of the ivermectin research that had been published to that point, and suffice to say, it was riddled with similar studies. Few that were as obvious, but riddled with similarly problematic research.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how this research came to be in the first place. Those that stand to profit from selling ivermectin possibly could have been involved in making this happen, having something to point to, and that's
Again, I don't think so, personally. My personal opinion is that the people who are currently benefiting from ivermectin, I mean, there were a couple of examples where you could argue that there was some financial conflict of interest. There's a company called MedinCell that during COVID, they had a proprietary ivermectin formula. They had a long-acting injectable form of ivermectin that they were trying to sell. And they did a study that they claimed showed massive benefits. That's an odd story because they published that, or they never published the study. The only information on the study was a poster that they put online in 2023 after ivermectin had stopped being a concern, and they've never fully published the results, and they no longer sell that product. So who knows what happened to MedinCell. Sure. But broadly speaking, I don't think anyone who's currently profiting off the ivermectin stuff in any way was motivated. And most of the people who ran these studies back in 2020 and 2021 had no financial conflict of interest whatsoever.
No, I believe that, certainly. But then you get to a point where claims are made. Let's talk about Pierre in particular, because this video that this interview is going in is about Pierre. But, he's had the benefit of almost 4 years now to reflect on all of this. All of this information is very available. The work that you've done, that a number of other researchers have done to demonstrate the fraudulence of all these studies, the studies that he himself propped up in order to substantiate his claims about ivermectin as this miracle drug and everything. Why the inability to admit fault? Why the inability to go, you know what, we jumped the gun and I got a little over exuberant and and just in the context of how much he has truly profited off of selling ivermectin, not through bureaucratic means, but just on the internet, as a thing on the side, an informal marketplace. What is your impression of Pierre, the guy he is, the statements he's made about ivermectin, about saying all vaccines are bad, literally all of them? He said that in debate against him. That was the first thing he said. What do you think of Pierre?
Honestly, I have no strong opinions about Pierre, Kory. He has said some very nasty things about me online. I think he's regularly claimed that I'm funded entirely by the pharmaceutical industry, which is not true. I've never received any pharmaceutical funding in my career. In fact, of the 5 people who worked on those studies, I don't believe any of us have ever received any pharmaceutical industry funding, because it would bias our work.
It's sort of a cop-out, right? That's just a way of getting people to reject anything you say without taking the responsibility of actually addressing what you're saying, right? You've shown you've told me very specific things about how these studies are fraudulent, right?
Or unreliable. Not all of them are fraudulent.
Sure,
Sorry,
unreliable. Yeah, done poorly or with ill intent, one or the other. But it's a way to just paint with a broad brush and say, disregard these people, disregard them. Pharma bad. This is Pharma man, so he's a bad man. Without looking at the data sets, and you've said very specific things about how the data is fraudulent in that one particular case. So you cannot really conclude anything other than you cannot conclude anything other than bad faith from a character like that. So
look, I mean, as I said, I have no strong opinions, or I haven't thought about Pierre since I last watched. Someone sent me a snippet of a video in which he implied that I was being paid by the pharmaceutical industry. I think that was in 2022. Since then, I genuinely have not once thought about the man. I haven't really, as I said when we started talking, I haven't really thought about ivermectin in years.
Honestly, I feel like this is kind of the dichotomy between Dave and like the other people he works with. They kind of don't see like the danger that like these anti-vaxxers are proposing. They think it's kind of just fun. It's not as fun in games. They think that they're minimizing their effect on society. Like they're getting people killed. They're forcing people to distrust experts. They're becoming like this deranged arbitrators of like, persecution, stuff like that. Like they're the persecuted and they're fighting the persecutors. Like this is the mind virus that they're causing. Like it's very serious, like what they're doing. And like Dave is trying to like communicate that to Gideon, and he's not. He doesn't seem like he's a very online person. So you may not understand what Dave is trying to do, but Dave is basically like, look at his face right now. Like, I think that Dave is pretty serious. Like going into like why he tears down these people so ferociously. Like, there's one video he did where like he was reacting to like a Jubilee video, and like some crazy woman who was resoundingly crazy and like hated all vaccines and like was distrusting the scientists. Like she mentioned like spontaneous abortion. And like Dave was like, "Oh, you mean are you trying to say miscarriage? I mean, like spontaneous abortion is like actually like the way you're supposed to present that. It's a more like it's a more feminist way of presenting like miscarriages as opposed to like it's more neutral and opposed to like it being like the female's fault or like it's like a thing that happens, you know. But Dave obviously was like he didn't want to like give credit to he didn't want to give any ground, any credit. He wants to tear into them, he wants to discredit them because they are like arbitrators of disinformation of like ideas that kill people. So I think that that's kind of like the dichotomy between Dave and like this guy. Like Dave is more serious. Like he thinks, that he needs to destroy these people and their speech online and their ideas online. Whereas like Gideon's like less serious. He thinks this is more lower. It's not as serious as what he thinks it is, even though it's pretty fucking serious. I mean, trying to get rid of all the vaccine mandates, like you can clearly see like the overarching plot of this disinformation, this mind control, and it encapsulating the public to where they distrust and reject to the point where it's gonna lead to mass deaths. Like it's a lot more serious than what I think Gideon is making it out to be. Yeah.
It's a fantastically effective drug for a small number of diseases and doesn't really work for anything else. And I also think it's useful to understand that none of this requires that people, none of these problems require that people are acting in bad faith. So I even regardless of what you think about Pierre, I would say there are absolutely people who believe that ivermectin works who are 100% good faith actors. And they have just been conned, essentially, by tricksters and frauds. Mm-hmm. Because if you approach all of these studies with a sort of firm belief that no one would ever try to trick you, then you are very easy to fool. Yeah. And also a deep misunderstanding of how scientific research should work.
Sure.
I think, you know, if you have, I don't mean to be mean to non-medical researchers, but let's say you had a very intelligent physicist who went after this problem in a good faith manner, they might conclude that ivermectin works because they're not familiar with medical research.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. Yeah, a different field. But I guess we're uncovering sort of the difference in the sphere of focus of a researcher, an epidemiologist versus a science communicator. I think about people like Pierre every day. So I sometimes envy. You can sort of just go, well, this guy doesn't matter.
I don't talk about people's intentions. I'm not here to litigate anyone's intentions. Because I think people do things for many different reasons, and sometimes there's a monetary.
I think he's doing it for monetary gain.
Well, I'm here to elucidate intentions, so I'll do that on behalf of you. You don't have to do it. You don't have to impose yourself. So let's pivot. I have one more question because you are an epidemiologist. You live in Australia. I was curious as to any thoughts you had regarding the COVID response, vaccine hesitancy, discrepancy.
I'll stop right here. We'll stop. Very fruitful conversation. I'll finish the rest of it at some point while I'm freaking tired. Holy frick. Yeah, it was overall a pretty good video by Dave. Pretty informative. Taught me some new things about medical like trials and stuff like that. It was pretty informative. I hope I'm not really the best scientist. I'm not a fucking scientist. I do know some things about science, but I'm not the best. I know what I know, and but I hope my commentary is pretty enjoyable and stuff like that. I hope I'll definitely link Dave's video and Dave's channel. Very good video, but we'll watch the next part at some point later this week or at some point.